Marhaba, Shalom, and welcome to the exciting new podcast Israel and Palestine Unpacked that is dedicated to exploring the complexities of the ongoing political situation between Palestinians and Israelis. Throughout the course of this podcast, it is my hope that we can delve into the historical and contemporary events and ideas that have shaped the course of this long-standing geopolitical and humanitarian crisis, as well as explore the ongoing and unresolved issues, while remembering the human cost, experience, and perspective. The situation has been brought into sharp focus nationally and internationally by recent events that have dominated our screens as well as our thoughts. The aim here is to be sensitive, as I understand that emotions are easily triggered. It is important to note that the topic will be approached from an academic position, to unpack and understand the issues, and that all views expressed will be and are the views of the interviewees alone. In today's episode, we're joined by an Israeli and a Palestinian, both of whom come from agricultural backgrounds. What makes their stories unique is that neither currently lives in their homeland, as they both called Northern Ireland home for more than 2 decades. However, this is where the comparison ends, as both individuals have grown up in vastly different cultures and societies, shaped by contrasting histories, narratives, and personal experiences. It's crucial to recognise that while they share common ground in having lived outside their homeland for so long, their journeys are not the same. Each carries a unique set of memories, challenges, and perspectives that cannot be compared or conflated. I do hope that you find this episode of Israel and Palestine Unpacked informative, and if you would like to receive more content, you are welcome to subscribe and join us as we journey to gain insightful perspectives and knowledge together. In our first interview, we speak with Yael, who comes from a village near Haifa, a bustling port city in the Galilee region of Israel, located approximately 45 minutes from the Lebanese border. Her village is known for its strong farming traditions, where generations of families have cultivated the land, fostering a deep connection to agriculture. Life in this close-knit community revolves around shared values, with a strong emphasis on family, cooperation, and tradition. Growing up in such an environment, Yael experienced the unique blend of rural life set against the backdrop of both the natural beauty and the political realities of the region. We join the interview with Yael speaking about her family upbringing and roots in northern Israel.
I come from a small village in the north of Israel, in an area that's called Emek Israel, between Nazareth and Haifa. So north, but not north as you hear today in the news. My family, father was born in the same village that I was born in, so we pretty much have been there since before 1948. We grew up, we're as what you would define farmers, very much the simple life as you'd see them, a lot of open spaces, running free, small community, everybody knows everybody, and surrounding us there are Bedouin settlements that we would go and do our shopping. They would come and work for us in the agricultures and the fields and the farms. Yeah, very relaxed lifestyle. In terms of like early childhood, then the older I got, leading into the 90s, was a little bit more intense with suicide bombers hitting buses, hotels, in the streets. So there was a bit more apprehension going out of the village and doing things in certain areas and certain times because of everything that was going on around. But I lived a very sheltered life.
And how diverse is that part of Israel in terms of religious demographics, in terms of Israeli Jews and Arabs and so on? You mentioned Bedouins, for example.
Yeah. So again, unfortunately, where I come from, we didn't have a lot of diversity until I think I was about 9-ish. In the early 1990s, there was a big aliyah, there was a big wave surge of Jewish Russians that came to Israel, Ethiopians Jewish that came to Israel, and that's where we started getting to know immigrants, Jewish immigrants, and seeing different backgrounds and cultures. But again, I grew up in a small community. It was different to somebody growing up in the cities. Because Israel is such a mixture of ethnicities, myself, my origins are from my mother's side. We come from Arab countries, Yemen and Syria. My dad comes from East Europe, the grandparents, and from Russia, great grandparents. So there is a lot of conversation in Israel going on around where are you from, i.e., where are your roots from, because that would provide you an insight to the house you grew up, potentially certain foods that they would eat. Where I'm from, literally across the road, there's two big Bedouin villages, but they go to their schools. We did, in the youth club that I was in, we did started doing integrated, because they were part of our local council. We did some more integrated activities together and kind of got to know them a bit more. Most of them serve in the army, so you would meet different ethnicities like that. In Israel, it's diverse in terms of mixture of religions and cultures and languages and colors, and everybody's treated the same. There isn't really segregation at all on that aspect, not where I'm from anyway.
You mentioned the army. Can you share a little bit about your experience? Where were you based? What did you do?
First of all, I would say that it's a privilege to have served my country. The IDF is the only army in the world that has a special force, an education force. And I was in the education force. I was an education soldier and then became an education officer. I've served my country for 3.5 years, which is above what I was obliged to serve. The role of the education soldiers is to, first of all, help soldiers that come from maybe less advantaged economical backgrounds be exposed to theatre, to lectures, to further education if they need to complete their GCSEs, their A levels. It's also being used, the IDF, as almost like a benchmark and a leveler for people who come from different social backgrounds, who might have families under the poverty line where they weren't really able to go to school and they had to work. Then they can come to the army and develop themselves. So when they finish their obligation, they then can be part of the working society and get an advantage to better their lives. So that is one of the aspects that the education force is dealing with. Another one is allowing soldiers to understand the complexity of the situation that they might be in, dealing with civilians populations, whether within Israel or in the West Bank, dealing with moral questions. If you think about it, these are 18-year-old kids that are tasked with protecting their country, their fellow soldiers, the civilians, and it's not an easy role. It's not in black and white. There's a lot of situation where even the question that we put to them had caused so much conversation and conflict that this is the reason that we do it. And I think it's really important for people to understand that we do not train the soldiers in the IDF to be killing machines. The whole point of the education force is to make sure that our soldiers using their heads and their hearts as well as their weapons. And I loved my service. As I said, I was an officer. I left the army as a lieutenant, and I've learned a lot through these 3.5 years, and was exposed to a lot of conflicts, moral questions, and what does that mean, serving your country? What does that mean, wearing uniform and holding a gun in your hand? And why are we doing this? What is our connection to Israel? Why is it important that the Jewish people will have an independent state that they will be protected in? What does it mean to the Israelis that live in Israel, but also to the Jewish living abroad after the Holocaust and everything that the Jewish people have went through in order to have a free country?
From an international perspective, the IDF do come under a great deal of criticism for some of the actions that occur while in Gaza. How would you respond to something like that? Thinking from your perspective as an educator.
I would like to break my answer down to different levels. So, first of all, I think that you will always have situation in life when you have such vast number of soldiers with different experiences, with different backgrounds, with maybe different losses in their personal lives, that would react in different ways. Again, these are people who did not, it's not like the British Army or the American Army where people chose to join and make a profession out of it. These are 18-year-old children who, down to education, to society, to peer pressure, chose to do the job that they're doing, whether it be paratroopers or infiltrators or parachuters, whatever they decide to do in the tanks. And not all of them, not all of them want to do it. It's one thing to remember. It's the law. It's very hard to get out of military service. And B, what they have been through to the point that you may see them losing it. 99% of the time, there has been a lead up to that kind of behavior. These are extreme situations. I have spoken to soldiers who have went into a home due to intelligence of weapons, suicide bombs, different reasons why they go into a search in a home. And they could be sitting there, an old lady, frail, don't move me, it's just me, there's nobody here. And when they do finally move her, she's sitting, knowingly sitting on the sleek where all the weapons are in, or sending children with backpacks with bombs on them to the border to explode. And you're looking at a child, a 9-year-old child or a 13-year-old child that is coming to you with a suicide bag to explode on you and kill you and your friends. And you have to stand there holding your gun thinking, do I shoot the 13-year-old so I don't die? Or am I being now humane and let him come and explode with me and kill me? And I think that when you sit and watch it in the news, you don't see the complexity of the situation. You don't know the fear, the true fear for your life, the true fear for your friend's life at that point. Now, in saying that, could there be things that can be done better? Have I not heard of scenarios and spoke to soldiers about scenarios where soldiers did not follow the code of conduct? So people don't understand, but every soldier that joins the army has a code of conduct. It's a tiny wee booklet that we all have to put in our front pocket, and it tells you what are the 10 principles and values the Israeli army has and we expect all soldiers to follow. And one of them is to refuse an illegal command. And an illegal command will be shoot an innocent, kill an innocent is an illegal command, and soldiers are expected to refuse that command. So again, I think if you put things in perspective, if you would benchmark the IDF compared to other armies in the world, truthfully and objectively, you will see that the IDF still, even with everything that's happening in Gaza, holds the highest moral obligation and has the least amount of innocent civilians being killed as a collateral damage. And that is not information that comes from me. These are facts and numbers by head army, Britain, US, that are looking very critically at what the IDF is doing at the minute. So I think that the world is not perfect. Situations are not perfect. When you hear stories about the terrorists in Gaza putting recorders of crying babies to try and lure the Israeli army into the buildings just to explode the buildings on them, then you have to understand when you're in such intense fighting zone, things get blurred. The stress level, the cortisol level that your body is under with not sleeping, not eating, fighting hours and hours, days on days. This is how the tragic accident of our Israeli soldiers shooting and killing 3 hostages, Israeli hostages, and killing them can happen. I wish it didn't, but it does. But I think a lot of the criticism that the IDF is sitting under, it's expected to meet standards that no other army in the world is expected to meet. And I think that kind of leads to something else. I'm not going to touch it, but I think there's a lot of anti-Semitism in there.
How has your experience been living in Northern Ireland?
Initially, when I came to Northern Ireland, it was very important for me to learn about the conflict here and what is really happening, trying to understand, because from an outsider, everybody looked exactly the same to me. But people that I spoke to knew, oh, they're from this side and they're from this side. And I was very curious to know what is it that when you're looking at somebody, do you know which side they belong to? I found it very fascinating. There was one thing that was very obvious to me the first year that I was here, and that was I will never judge people here because I haven't lived the reality. So my ex was the first relationship I had here. I was married to him. He was a Catholic from the Falls Road. I had a very I've learned about the conflict. I've learned about Northern Ireland and Belfast from Catholic/middle point of view. And as I got to know more people and change where I lived. So I lived on the Falls Road. I lived in East Belfast on the Bearsbridge Road and Lower Newtonards Road. I realised 2 things. One, and I think it was the strongest thing, that Northern Ireland conflict and what is happening in Israel, the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts, are not even remotely near. They're not even like slightly connected. And the reason Northern Ireland took sides is political, and there's really nothing to it. 99.9% of the people that either put a Palestinian flag in West Belfast or an Israeli flag in East Belfast don't even know why they do it. For many, many years, felt that there was hope for Israel as well, because I thought if people here, after so many years of conflict, after so much death, even though there's still parts in Belfast where there is a massive wall separating areas, people can still walk out and go and work side by side with somebody from the different side. And people here almost know how to like right, I'll put this in a box right now. Now I need to work. I need to be professional and I'll do it. And then I can still hold my own opinions and do what I need to do. And I guess maybe it happens in Israel with the Arabs that live in Israel, Christian, Muslims, Bedouin, Druze, Cherkess. But I think what I got was could this happen to us and the Palestinians? Could this show that yes, you can have a wall separating between you, but people are people. And at the end of the day, people want to earn their money, live with respectfully, enjoy life, love the people that they love rather than hate and fight and kill.
You're listening to Israel and Palestine Unpacked with me, your host, Porrick. If you have any comments, questions or feedback, please feel free to contact me at israelpalestineunpacked@gmail.com, or alternatively, you can connect via our Facebook page or X, formerly known as Twitter. All contact information can be found below in the description. Before we move on to the next interview, I would like to announce that in early 2025, we will be shifting focus and looking specifically at the important role that Jerusalem plays between both Palestinians and Israelis. We will continue to delve into the experiences and views of the people who make up the city, offering a personal yet intimate look at daily life in this deeply contested space. However, we will also examine the key issues such as the important historical attachment that both peoples have towards this city and how this has shaped their identities. This includes the development of settlements, evictions, and the stumbling block that the city has become for any possible future peace agreement. Through these discussions, we hope to unpack the various components that make Jerusalem such a pivotal and emotional focal point. In our second interview today, we are speaking with Mohammed, who hails from a small rural agricultural village which produces olives, fruits and vegetables that contribute to the local economy. The village is close to the Palestinian city of Nablus, which is nestled between Mount Gerizim to the south and Mount Ebal to the north. The city itself has been known for its famous soap production historically, as well as its regionally famous sweet dessert, kanefa, a dish made from pastry, cheese and syrup which can be garnished with crushed pistachios and cinnamon. Mohammed begins his interview by speaking about his childhood, the impact that Israeli settlers have had on the local community, as well as the effect of the First Palestinian Intifada, which erupted in 1987.
It wasn't a normal childhood, I have to say, to grow up in these circumstances at the time. That was back in the 80s. Like during the summer break, the school summer break, we wanted to play and go to the fields, but it was dangerous in the sense that Israeli settlers were about, and we heard stories of killing Palestinians, and they used to come to our villages, driving a van, playing music, selling ice cream, and there was reports of people going and get lured into that, and then not coming back again, and coming to ask people about remote areas they were looking for, and on the hope, and that they said people who went with them with good intentions, went just to show them where they're looking for, which was remote. They were killed. So it was all this. So it wasn't really the sort of normal thing. Then we realized we can't. As I grew up, realized we were discriminated against in all aspects. Though we were administered by the same Israeli government, but the Palestinians had very different healthcare system, school education system, schools, school facilities. All of that were very inferior to the Israeli ones, which later I learned it was just a manifestation of apartheid. When I was 12 years old, this first intifada started, and we were at school at the time, and immediately the Israelis. Well, it started in December, and the midterm break was the 3 weeks between the first semester and second semester. We went to this 3 weeks break, and then we weren't allowed back to school. The Israelis decided to close the schools in Gaza and the West Bank during that period, and that went on well into the summer. So we missed the whole second semester. I was difficult. I nearly cried because I was looking at my books and I'm thinking of children elsewhere in the world going to school and learning, and we don't know when our schools were going to open again. So yeah, it was difficult. At some point, I was looking at I think the history or geography book. I was like nearly cried. Looking at it like I'm missing out on all of this. Then they were just opening them for 2 months during the summer when we were supposed to have our summer break. They done that twice, 1988 and then 1989. That happened again. So we were denied the right to education, which is, against the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the international law, because the state is, the Israel as the occupying power is supposed to be ensure that we got to get our education. And before that, even more important than the right to education, the right to life. A lot of people, it was stone throwing uprising, yet a lot of people were killed by firearms, being killed by the Israeli army, including one of my classmates. He was walking home from school and he was shot dead by an Israeli settler. And several people I knew as well were killed by the Israeli army, people who weren't involved in anything. Even if they were involved, it was only stone throwing. But in many cases, I know my cousin's husband was a taxi driver, and he had a groom and a bride at the start of the uprising in his car, and they just got married and they were going to a hotel, I think, and the Israeli soldiers on the checkpoint one soldier asked him to stop, the other asked him to drive, and then it went on like that. And then the last thing, the soldier told him just to drive on, and as he drove, the other soldier opened fire on the car, and my cousin's husband was shot in the head and eventually died in hospital, leaving 2 orphans, and his wife was pregnant with their third child. So this kind of I grew up in that sort of environment.
Very recently, the Irish states, along with Norway and Spain, made the decision to recognize the state of Palestine. And I quote Simon Harris, the Taoiseach, where he said, "We recognize the state of Palestine. We do so because we believe in freedom and justice as the fundamental principles of international law, and because we believe that permanent peace can only be secured upon the basis of the free will of a free people." In your opinion, Mohammed, in what way can an independent Palestine help create the conditions for a just peace within the land and within the region?
The thing about, obviously, we want to live in peace, and peace can only achieved through justice. And I think this is the principal difference with the Israelis, that they believe peace comes from security, from deploying more tanks, more soldiers, more fences, more walls, and this is how they see it. Basically, more oppression. But Israel's security could only be achieved if you have peace, and peace could only come from justice. And justice means the Palestinians, like any other nation on this planet, are entitled to their right to self-determination, as I think Simon Harris mentioned as well, the right to self-determination, which a right we grew up to. That was the main demand, for the Palestinians, the right to self-determination, right to return, the right of the Palestinian refugees to return to their homes. They're the longest waiting and the largest refugee group in the world. And the right to independent state. So these are the three, main objectives of the Palestinian national struggle, which are legitimate rights, with UN resolutions calling for these things to be granted to the Palestinians, in terms of Resolution 194 about the right of the Palestinian refugees to return. Israel does not comply with that one. It's now 1949, I think, was issued. Like dozens of other UN resolutions that Israel refused to comply with. So the right to return, the right to independent Palestinian state. Again, as I said earlier, Netanyahu said he will never allow the creation of a Palestinian state, and the West Bank is the backyard of Israel. And basically, it's the right, to self-determination. So if the Palestinians have their rights based on justice, then this will be, this means, yes, peace for, if Israel wants the peace, really, this is what they need to do, give the Palestinians their rights. But you can't oppress people and expect to silence them. And if they stand for their rights, then label them as terrorists. You can't do that, and a lot of the nations are waking up for that, and this is reflected in what you mentioned about the Taoiseach, Simon Harris, Norway and Spain, and we hope more will follow. And obviously, I think from what Simon Harris said is that it's what the Irish used to ask for in 1921. That's what they were asking for, and they understand, the Palestinian demands. There's two issues: one for the region and one for the, for the U.S. For the region, unfortunately, the Israeli occupation is not only destroying Palestinian lives and denying the Palestinian people their rights, but the whole socio-economic development in the region is delayed by Israel and its occupation of Palestine. Not only Palestinian land, Arab land. I mean, in 1967, they occupied the Golan Heights as well. They occupied Sinai Desert. They termed it, but it's much bigger than Gaza and the West Bank, much bigger than the whole of actually historic Palestine. So there is an issue with the whole effect of Israel destabilizing the whole region. And even its rejection of democracy in the Arab world, its demand that the United States is to keep Egypt under dictatorship and not to allow the transformation to democracy, because that's perceived as a threat to Israel when people elect their leaders, and that dictators, puppets, is the safest option for Israel. So there is an impact on blocking the transformation towards the democracy and the socio-economic development, including many rights, including women's rights as well. Because with the delaying the transformation to democracy and the socio-economic development, you are, indulging the whole place in poverty, in tyranny, in order for Israel to continue its occupation of Palestinian land and to be a dominant force in that region. I mean, the transformation for, all what the Arabs say, the principal thing that when I was a child we're always demanding for peace for land. So, give us, the land occupied in 1967, Gaza and the West Bank, and you will get peace. End of the story. But as I said, the Israeli politicians, as I mentioned earlier, they are keen on land grabbing. They are not interested in independent Palestinian state, in achieving peace through giving the Palestinians their rights. If anything, former Israeli Prime Minister who passed away, Ariel Sharon, when I read his biography, he's quoted saying, "War is the milk of Israel. Without war, Israel does not survive." So yeah, so that's this is one of the things. The other thing is for the U.S. really to put pressure on Israel to stop arming Israel, to put the pressure that unless they work towards peace with the Palestinians, that they can't continue supporting them. Unfortunately, the U.S. continue to support, I think, $3.8 billion a year military aid to Israel. Estimated, I think, $246 billion since the creation of Israel in military aid. That's what we know, formal military aid. We don't know about other forms of aid to Israel through NGOs, through other forms, and non-military aid. So without U.S. pressure, unfortunately, it's difficult to see how the peace can be achieved and how Israel can be stopped from what it's doing. But to answer your question, yes, there is. I mean, the creation of a Palestinian state, an actual Palestinian state, and is important for peace and reconciliation.
Yeah. It's interesting because Simon Harris spoke, and I don't want to quote him because I genuinely can't remember what it was he said, but he spoke it from a perspective of a two-state solution. In light of everything that you've spoken about, where you talk about the increase in settlers and settlements in the West Bank, how likely or unlikely is a two-state solution? From my perspective, from my understanding, from my experience of living there, it's difficult to see on a practical level how that actually can be realized. What is an alternative, equitable outcome to the conflict situation in historic Palestine, in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict?
Well, I mean, I've been saying for a number of years now, because I was sort of more keen on the one-state solution. Then I realized, I was told that actually that was proposed in the 70s by the PLO, one multi-ethnic, democratic, secular state, and that was rejected by Israel. And obviously it was, why they rejected that, because they don't believe in equality. They don't believe that the Palestinians are equal to them. As recently, the Israeli National Security far-right minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said the Gentiles are there just to serve them. That's the only reason behind the existence of what he referred to as the Gentile, the Goyim, that just to serve, that's just to be their servants. So they don't accept that the Palestinians are equal to them. So this is kind of part of the, that they don't accept that land is only theirs, that doesn't belong to anybody else. So coming from this ideology, they don't accept they will not accept the one-state solution. But for me, I think for now, I mean, I've been saying for a number of years that this is a useless debate. It's not as if Palestine is liberated or about to be liberated, and we are just discussing, is it going to be one state or two states? Because the only thing that's happening, the only project that's progressing, is the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians project. And we have seen over the years, as I said, how even the agreement, Oslo Accord, which was signed to achieve peace and to create a Palestinian state, was used to ethnically cleanse more Palestinians and to grab more land by Israel. So I don't really give it too much thought anymore about the one-state, two-state solution. Yes, the two-state solution is dead and buried. Some people would have the argument that one state is fine, but you need to reverse Sykes-Picot Agreement, which partitioned that region. It used to be Greater Syria, which included the current Syria, Jordan, Palestine, and Lebanon, that to reunify these back in one country, to end the partition, and whoever, for all, and people can live there together, not only in historic Palestine, but the whole region, where the Israelis, who live in Israel now, can be part of that, not just one, but not just what used to be historic Palestine, which now Israel and Gaza and the West Bank. And some people don't talk about that. Some people just say they want the one-state solution, because, as you mentioned, it became next to impossible to create for the two-state solution, because Israel made it impossible for the Palestinian state to exist, but Israel is making it impossible for the Palestinians to exist. The two-state solution supporters come from the idea that there are UN resolutions about the creating a Palestinian state. That's 242, 338 UN resolution, 242 and 338. So the UN resolutions are there. You got the legal framework. You just got to implement it. So so that's easy. That's kind of more sort of straightforward as far as they're concerned from a legal point of view. But then you could talk about, then from legal point of view, the right to return the Palestinian refugees to their homes. most of them came from areas now called Israel. So from legal point of view, is it okay for them to return to the Gaza and the West Bank? Not really, their homes. And that would, the one-state solution effectively deny them the right to return to their homes, because that's it now, it's gone. But in general, but they see that, I mean, if this right was properly, I mean, the two-state solution based on your resolutions, if it was to be applied, I mean, yes, Israel then need to dismantle the settlements, which is next to impossible. So this leaves the one-state solution, but then even with that, what about the settlers who live in the West Bank? They live on stolen land. I mean, each one of these solutions got massive problems to deal with. But the main thing, I think, the main task now is to stop the ethnic cleansing, to stop the ongoing genocide in Gaza right now, and to stop the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians, not only in Gaza and the West Bank, but inside Israel itself as well. Inside Israel itself, there are Palestinians who are not allowed to return to their own villages. They live inside the state of Israel. They're not far from their own villages, but they're not allowed to return to their own villages to live, which are empty, but they're not allowed to return to them. So these are the issues that even Israel is threatening them, the same that they are members of the Israeli Knesset saying this, what they call Israeli Arabs aren't loyal to the state, we should expel them. They're calling for so the ethnic cleansing is facing Palestinians everywhere. These are the things I think that need to be focused on more than the one state, two state, because the one state, two state, as I said, it's just for now it's a useless debate. I mean, yes, the two state is dead, the two state solution is dead, but that multi-ethnic secular state, because of the nature of the Zionist ideology, its supremacy and its chauvinistic nature, and it's which is well reflected by the racist practices of Israel, which was referred to as an apartheid state by Amnesty International, makes it as well impossible for the one-state solution. It would be great if we have the one-state solution, where all who live in that land are equal citizens, regardless of whatever. That would be ideal, but considering the nature of the Zionist ideology, it's impossible for that to happen either, because of the nature of that ideology.
As we finish up today, I would like to extend my gratitude to both Yael and Mohammed for sharing their views, experiences, and stories. In our next episode, we will interview Dr. Erica Jimenez, a Leverhulme Early Career Fellow at the School of Law and a Mitchell Institute Fellow, Queen's University Belfast. Dr. Jimenez will talk about her recently published book, Rethinking Human Rights, Critical Insights from Palestinian Youth. So until then, what's left to say is thank you for joining us, and if you have any feedback or comments, please feel free to share your perspective by getting in touch via email at Israel-Palestine-Unpacked@gmail.com, or alternatively via our Facebook page. All contact information can be found below in the description. I hope that you'll join me next time on Israel and Palestine Unpacked.